Alrighty, hello everyone, happy Thursday. I hope this video is finding you well, whether you're watching us live right now or whether you will be watching us in the future. This is our very first NoCode Ops Community Show, and today we will be talking about Make, a great automation no-code tool. So let me just join the space. This here that you can see is our accessible metaverse, as I like to call it, based on a platform called GatherTown. And this is where we build our virtual offices and where we will be hosting these kind of events every Thursday. So let me just reach the people. All right. Hey, Guy, I'm here. So if you want to follow me, I'll take you into the arena where everyone else is.
All right.
Awesome. You can use the arrows. Yeah. Yeah, just right there. I wanted to recreate like a small town for us, and that's just through here. Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're going to go up to the auditorium. All right, and meet all the people. Hello, no-code operators. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm really excited because just as I was saying on YouTube, this is our very first NoCode Ops Community Show featuring Guy Butts presenting Make, which is a very popular no-code tool. I've never used it before, Guy, so I'm your perfect victim. So if you want to just go up onto the podium, I'm going to put you on the spot right there, just here. And yeah, feel free to just present to the people. And the way this is going to work, just for everyone here, we're going to let Guy present his topic, which once again will be all about Make, automating your stuff. And then we're going to mute our mics. So at the bottom bar on GatherTown, as you can see, there's the option for muting your mic right there. So please go ahead and do that. And at the end of Guy's presentation, we can either put our hands up using the emojis, just like what I'm doing here. And then we will be calling your names. You can ask your questions, so have a little bit of Q&A with our community. And if everything is working for you, Guy, I think we can start. You can tell us a little bit about yourself. Maybe how did you land into the no-code world? When did you first fall in love with no-code? And yeah, I'll be really curious to hear all about it.
Yeah, great. So my name is Guy. I run and own trying to scale a company called Datalytics, where we are now, after a bit of a transformation, more solution developers. So we specialize in no and low code solution development. The main of our bread and butter right now is automation development. So most of our clients come through and need automation, but we can then expand our services into different things aside from just automation. So we've got some clients that do a lot of work in Airtable. So we build Airtable solutions. We can tie that into automation with third-party automation platforms like Make, Zapier, what have you. I also have some clients that need database development. So like building Supabase or building like an actual database in that, or like BigQuery or some other platform. I've also got clients that need data visualization needs. So things like Power BI reports and dashboards. It's not necessarily automation all the time. So we have like a varying level of services, but most everything is centered around no and low code. Power BI is a low code development platform. You can run R and Python scripts in it, but it can also be everything out of the box. Like you connect to an API and you can just do everything visually. The same with Make and Zapier. The same with things like Supabase or Xano. It's all low and no code. It's doing different things, but it's all in those, low and no code capabilities. You don't need to write scripting or write all this stuff to do all this. So there's those are the kind of needs that we serve. How I got into doing this was not really by chance. I kind of fell into it after wanting to start a consultancy. I got started doing Excel like tool development. So not necessarily just reports, but building Excel tools for clients way back in 2018. And I saw the potential for being a freelancer, consultant, developer in that regard. So I started building a business and then realized, okay, I need to build a business. So doing things like client emails and doing all the like beginning business stuff that you need to do, I was like, well, I wonder if there's a way to automate this task. So then I found out about Zapier. I found out about Integromat, some of the other platforms at the time. Didn't really leverage them, didn't really use them that often. I was solely focused on doing the development of my service and trying to gain clients and do that. But about a year and a half later, I realized, well, why don't I just specialize in doing this automation development, because it fits more with my train of thought, with how I think, the way that I'm wired. So then I got into doing Zapier development, doing Zapier projects, and then I rediscovered Integromat, and how I could use that for not only my business but as a service as well to provide. So then I got into Integromat, kind of went away from Zapier, got more into Integromat, because I had discovered how not only easy it is to use, but how much better it is for me to visualize and learn, and then also view and review solutions and automations because of the visual aspect. It's similar to Zapier in that you've got node-based steps, trigger, and actions, but it's all laid out visually. So it's not, waterfall and then you've got 15 things you have to scroll down and find. It's all laid out for you. So that vibe with me really, really, really nicely. It's much easier for me to visualize a workflow that way. And that's where I kind of started and fell in love with Integromat. I still do some work in Zapier, still enjoy it. It's still a cool tool for me, but I don't lean on it as heavily because of its limitations. And there are some limitations as far as pricing and the workflow development in regard to that versus Make. So I'll be going over some of those topics in this overview as well, as to why I think Integromat, which is called now Make, but people are still using Integromat. So I can, we have clients in both Integromat and Make. They are two different platforms, by the way. So they're owned by the same company, but they are slightly different.
That's really interesting to
so that's kind of
specify,
my
because
intro.
some people might think, as you're saying, Integromat now Make, and for example, to me that wasn't necessarily meaning they have two platforms. I thought this used to be called Integromat, now it's Make. I didn't know there were two of them. So that's great. Well done for specifying that.
Yeah, they rebuilt the platform on a different code base in a different server style. So now instead of it being on one dedicated server for their whole company, it's all built through AWS, and you can actually choose your data centers when you're setting up your account. So it's built in a different way, built in a better way, to serve a lot more needs that they had gotten surfaced the past years, because they started in 2016, but we're working on the new platform since I think 2019 or 2018. So they've brought in a lot of that feedback, like, hey, we want more control or visibility on our data. So in the new Make platform, you can choose your data centers. Are you EU based or US based?
That's great.
There's a whole bunch of other factors as to why they did the newer development. It's kind of the same interface, like it looks the same. They did a different branding and colorway, but yeah, they are technically.
That's the power of user research for any business out there.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm not only that, but I'm also a Integromat and Make partner. I've been one since 2019. So I was involved with and doing a lot of the alpha and early user testing of Make. So
that's
before
amazing.
that, it was called Integromat.
I mentioned to them that you were coming to this event here for us today, and they actually gave me a little gift for our community, which I will be telling you guys at the end. So on top of having an amazing guest speaker here with Guy, we also have some gifts from Make, which is absolutely amazing.
Awesome. That's great. I'm excited for that. Yeah, I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun to develop in, to bring clients into, to have them discover what you can do with it. And really, whenever I'm trying to build or ideate around a solution, I typically start my either development or I start my thought process around automation, but Make. Like when I'm pitching a new solution to a client, hey, I want to automate X, Y, and Z. Okay, let's look at your stack, and is that stack either fully integrated into Make, or can I use it inside of Make already? Like, can I use it via API calls? Does it have an API that I can use in Make? So a lot of my thoughts in development centers around the Make platform and the automation capabilities of it.
Right. And if you were to just explain to, well, people used to say to your mom, what Make does, what would the simplest way of describing that be?
Yeah. So the Make platform, along with all of its competitors, are kind of the same. They are API automation platforms that have JavaScript, more namely IML functions in its platform. So what it does is it connects APIs together. So when we look at things like you trigger off an event, say a Calendly call is scheduled, that's a trigger, but really what that is it's a webhook event coming from Calendly that Zapier Make built into your account through their API. So whenever we do anything in these platforms, Calendly call scheduled, create a sheet or a row in Google Sheets, those are API calls. That's all this is. So it's just a very stable, very reliable API development platform when you're connecting those two steps in a visual way. And it has a whole bunch of other functions like filtering, all the IML functions you can do. So, write this one function to give me this output. That's a JavaScript function. So you're essentially playing with JavaScript in a no-code visual way that you can then turn on, be in production, and it's reliable, stable, and you can build on top of it. So it's essentially you're doing code development in a no-code way, obviously.
Yes, and the visual part of that I think is fundamental because myself included, I'm such a visual learner. I need to see what's happening and how it's happening for me to retain that kind of information. And I also organize these kind of events because that's how I learn, and that's how I think other people would be finding it helpful to learn. So thank you for being here once again. And I love anything visual, so no-code tools are for sure a winner for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. So that's one of the major advantages. Now, things like Zapier, Pabbly, they are visual. Like you can see the boxes and see the nodes, the steps, but they're not visual in the sense you can see the entire layout of the workflow. Like you can see the trigger and you can see all the branches of routing. There's a lot of other development advantages when using Make over Zapier. I will say Zapier's been out longer, so they've got a bit more of the market share and a bit more of the integrations. Like they have almost 5,000 integrated apps. Make has probably 1,500, maybe 2,000. So they're lower on what's pre-built for you. But what Make offers is a really easy way, and Zapier does too, it's not bad, but they always offer an easy way to make API calls or to do something a little bit more custom. There's a couple of cons to using Make, like their API calls. Either you have to pre-build the API call with one of the generic HTTP modules. The other disadvantage, and Zapier does that too, but when you need to run code, Zapier has a code by Zapier block that you can just drop in your JavaScript or your Python and run it. Make does not include some kind of module to just, hey, drop in your code block and it runs it for you. So you have to use like an external service, like onesas.co is a great service for that, where you hook up that service and that module, bring in your code block, and then they run it for you and give you the output. So
would you say that's a limitation for you? Yeah. Would you say that's a limitation?
It's not for me. It's not for me because I don't ever typically run code in my automations. I don't ever find a need for it, but just putting it out there as an introduction, like if you wanted to run code in a Make scenario, you'd need to use an outside service, like either a Lambda function, which AWS Lambda is integrated into Make, but you'd also have to use like an external service if you didn't want to use Lambda, for instance.
Perfect.
For running true code, like, hey, run this JavaScript code as part of your workflow. Well, there's no code block step like there is in Zapier, just as a preface. Yep.
Brilliant. And did you have any case studies for us for today? Did you want to show us the interface a little bit, maybe?
I absolutely will. And
Awesome.
this is my company's account, but there is one workflow. I'm still determining whether or not I should show it, but you're asking me to showcase a workflow that I'm proud of or that I feel is really impactful for the business. So when I get to that point, I do have one that I can showcase. It's for one of my clients, but it's a pretty neat workflow. All
Excited to
right,
see
so
that. Do you
let's,
know how to share the screen? So you should see at the bottom,
yeah,
yeah, there's a monitor for screen sharing. There it is. I can see that. Brilliant.
okay. So the interface of Make, I mean, this is exactly the interface when you set up your account. So if you've never been inside of Make, it's very similar to Integromat. In the like left side menu, this screen is a little different now, but Make and Integromat, the screens and the interfaces are kind of the same. If you've never used Make or Integromat before, this is like your dashboard, your homepage, what you can do everything with your account in. The one big advantage for Make over Integromat, though, Zapier has this function too, but is you can now have teams in your account. So if you're a large organization that, say a marketing team or revenue team or an operations team, maybe they need their own bucket of automation capability, but you want to keep them separate. Like if, say, the operations team has access to Airtable databases that the other team doesn't, that team can be in its own workspace inside of Make. So that's a part of the subscription model here. So as you see, there's a free plan, which is awesome. There's a core plan, which is what my business is on because I don't have a large organization. The Pro and Teams plan, maybe later I can go over some of the different differences between the two. But the bigger advantage is the Teams functionality when you want different sections of your organization or users of your company, if you have that, to have their own like containerized automation capability. So if you see on my left hand menu, I've got my organization, but within that I have one team because I'm on the core plan. But if I had a Teams plan, I would see different teams here. So I could go into the different team space and they would have their own scenarios, templates, connections, webhooks. Like all of this would be team dependent. So it's pretty neat in that regard. And Zapier has that, but it's very expensive. And that's kind of a big drawback in my opinion. But you can get that with just using the Teams plan starting out at $35 a month.
That's brilliant, and I think it's inevitable to just compare tools. As you know, there's many agencies that are trying to achieve or help and hack the same problems. So it's inevitable to just see and compare. I often say it's not often about the tool; it's about how you use it, and it's about what you need it for, right? So
exactly,
pros and cons for everyone.
Sure. Yeah, and they don't charge for users in your organization. So if you have multiple people, it's not like per user per month. Just another thing about that too. So there's a bunch of things to go into here, but just the overview of the platform. So you've got your organization, which is like your company. It gives you your subscription type. It gives you a nice overview of your operations that you've used, which in Make, operations are like tasks in Zapier. So each module that you run in a workflow is called it's called a module, but it uses operations. And we'll go over that in here in a minute. Data transfer, they also track data transfer. So if you're sending large files, sending big emails, they track data transfer as well. So just another metric to keep track of. You have a list of all of your active scenarios. So in Make, a automation is called a scenario. So these are the ones in my company that are turned on right now and actually live and working. So if we go to the left, we can see the different team menus, which again, I only have one team. The scenario, so this is the list of all of the active and inactive. They have concepts, but I don't ever really use concepts. So this is a list of all of the automations in this team, which is essentially my company. In Make, you can have as many scenarios as you want. So you can create and use as many as you want, but depending on your plan, if you're on a free plan, you can only have 2 that are active, and they do track that in your account. So if you go here and if you're on the free plan, you'll see another bar that says active scenarios. That's tracked in the free plan, but once you upgrade, you get unlimited. So it doesn't matter how many you have. So I've got a bunch right here, 23 that are active. Another nice organization feature is foldering. So they do have foldering capabilities.
I love a folder. That's why we use Discord, everyone, because I'm a freak of organizations and having things tidy and organized.
Absolutely. So they've got foldering, and you can have it, you name it whatever you want, and then you can put all of your scenarios in a folder if you want to. Otherwise, you can just keep them out here. You don't need to use it. So that's like your scenario screen. You can create one which ties it into the all scenarios like folder. But if you want to create one inside of that folder, just go to that folder, create new. So this is your scenario screen where you'll get into all of your scenarios, play around with them, turn them on or off. You can even do things like move them around, clone and delete them from this screen. So that's your scenarios. There also is a library of templates for Make, so you can go in, and if you're not sure what you want to do, and you're like, well, I want to use, say, an RSS or Telegram, say I want to use Facebook, so you can drop in a search, and it'll return the various scenario templates that use Facebook. Or Facebook to Discord, to Slack. So if you're just getting started and don't know what you want to build or what's available, you could even use a template or just go into a blank scenario and then just search for your app in that way too. Your connections screen, this is what houses all of your app connections in Make. So when you're building scenarios and you connect to Zoom, to Calendly, to Airtable, whatever, it's going to keep those connections in this connections screen. And this is where you can modify the connection, you can delete it, you can re-auth and verify. You can also check which scopes that has been given to that connection too. So if you're curious about that, you can click the little eyeball and it'll tell you what scopes from that product it's given to you.
Do you get notified if something's not working for whatever reason?
For like a scenario failure?
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. And I can go over that here in a minute as well. So that's your connections. Again, you can rename, modify them, do whatever you need to here. The webhooks page is what houses and lists all of the webhooks used in all of your scenarios, not just webhooks, but also mail hooks. So another advantage of Make is you can actually leverage a mail hook instead of just a standard webhook. There is a difference. Say for an email, you want to forward an email to a mail hook to trigger a scenario, you would use a mail hook instead of a webhook, which a webhook looks like a web URL, but a mail hook is an email address. It's just tied to a web server, which triggers a scenario the same way a webhook would.
This is
So you can use both. I've got some neat
masterclass.
solutions that do that. Yeah. So like for me and my business, I offer like an automation monitoring service, but when I'm monitoring an Integromat or Make account, I have an email address that all the errors go to, and it forwards to a scenario. So it's forwarding to a mail hook, which triggers an automation. Yep. So that's your webhook section. Again, you can rename them, move them around. This lists all the webhooks. When you set up a scenario using Calendly as a trigger, they'll build a webhook in the app for you, but it lists it here. So you can either delete it in the scenario, or you can also delete it out here if you're done with it, or you can turn it off if you're testing. For instance, if you're testing the webhook, you can turn it off here, turn it on. The only caveat to using webhooks and mail hooks in Make is there's one per scenario. So you can't have one webhook, like one address, trigger
Multiple
different
stuff,
scenarios.
right?
Yes. Yep. So just putting that out there, that was a big issue, and there's still questions in the community around that in the Integromat and Make communities. But just to preface it, there's one webhook per scenario. So if you're thinking about using that, there are ways to do that, but that's just a limitation for their platform. And I'm going to go into that for that feature here in a minute. But one webhook per scenario, and you can actually see which scenario it's tied to when you're in this screen. So if you're like, well, where is this webhook living, or where it's being used, you can click this button and go to the scenario that's using it. Keys. This is for API keys in your Make account, because Make has an API. So if you're wanting to do operations in and around Make itself, you can do that with their API, but you just have to build some API keys first. Devices. Integromat does have a mobile app. So if you want to get like Apple push notifications, you can do that with their Apple app, and you integrate your device through a scenario, and it would list it here under devices. Data stores. So Make and Integromat have a quasi-internal database, in that it's, and I say quasi because it's not like a full-on database solution like Airtable, like Postgres, like whatever else. It is like a primitive database where it's got data types, it's got keys, you have different columns and such. I don't use them in my business, but you can use it for temporary storage. You can use it for even long-term storage, but it has very, very low storage capability. So I wouldn't use it for a long-term solution. I would use it for like storing data for a day or two and then retrieving it and deleting the record. Data structures. So this is something that you can specify a structure for data. So if you get into using data through JSON or building your own data structures, you can specify it here. And then this is also what powers the data store's structure. So when you build a data store, you'll also choose the structure. A little bit more complex, may not need to go over that right now, but just wanted to show the feature that you can keep data inside of Make itself in your account up to a certain amount per your plan. So like right now, I can have a data store up to 10 megs, but if I wanted multiple, I could, I would have to, size that down a bit, but you can. And then the My Apps.
Does
this
it
is
change?
Where you can create your
does
own
it change according to what scenario you're creating? The weight of what your automations. So, say for example, you're connecting Calendly to Gmail. Would that be a different data than something else, than another scenario? Does it depend on what apps you're using?
The data store itself?
Yeah, like how much
data
the weight.
stores are so data stores are separate from a scenario. Like you don't create a data store for a scenario. You would create a data store if you need to house data for a certain period to like retrieve it at a later date. This like data stores are used by folks that want to create like a long-term wait. So if you have a workflow that if a new user signs up and then you want to wait a day to send them another email, Make doesn't allow you to wait in the execution of the running scenario for longer than 40 minutes. So what people do is they create a data store that creates a record in it, and then another scenario that goes and looks at those records and says, does the day match, today or the time? And then it runs that scenario. So there's uses for data stores, but no, you don't have to create a data store for each scenario.
Gotcha.
They're different. They're separate in that you don't need one for the other, but you can use data stores for temporary storage of things. So the My App section, this is where you can actually create your own application. This is a whole other world of Make because you have to be very knowledgeable in JavaScript and web development. HTML, CSS, stuff like that. A lot of partners offer this, but I've never gotten into it myself. I'm just not comfortable with JavaScript. But if you wanted to, it's similar to like the Zapier development platform in that you can create your own applications, but there's a lot that goes into it. So I never use this feature, but you can also get apps developed for you by some partners in the Make Partner community. They'll build it inside of your account. Maybe you have a custom software. Maybe you want an app for a platform that doesn't or isn't built into Make, and you want to create it yourself. So you could do that as well. So that's like the big features of Make. Here, I'll go into the profile. So when you're saying about like email alerts and things like that, so this is where you'll get notified based on certain events. So in your email preferences of your profile, so if you are in your account and go to profile, email preferences, so here's where you can turn, they call them global notifications, but it's things like, they say tips for success, product updates. You can get notified of all these different like marketing options or these different email campaigns by Make themselves. And then for your organization, you can turn on or turn off these kinds of alerts. So, hey, tell me when a scenario is deactivated for whatever reason. Tell me when there's a warning in the execution of a scenario. Tell me if there's an error, which this happens for any number of reasons, like an API call fails or something happens in a service that's unavailable. So turn those on or off.
And that comes with any plan you're on, even the free plan?
It does.
Right.
It does.
Cool.
And it's customizable. So if you don't want to be notified, maybe you have a developer in your company that's doing this for you. Maybe you, the owner, turn it off, but your developer has it on. So it's completely up to you. You can also change out your time zone settings. So for here on the web, for instance, I'm set to New York, but in my scenarios, maybe the scenarios use a different time zone. Because if I'm developing for somebody in a different time zone, their scenarios need to run in their local time zone. So I can change that setting.
Oh, that's really helpful, actually, especially as
Context.
work, has moved completely remote. This is really a great feature to have.
Absolutely. And they can change it in their account, but I do most development work for other clients in their own accounts. So this is key. But I can change it from my account because I'm an admin of their account. You can also turn on 2FA. So for Make, you can enable 2FA for your organization if you would like it.
So that's a really great point about somebody's career, as once again everything is kind of moving towards no code, Web3, and so many new roles will come up, and I feel like the no code operator will be such a big figure. It already is, but for example here in Europe maybe it's not as widely known as there in the US, but I do believe that in a couple of years will be fundamental to have a no code operator in your company. So is that what you're providing? For example, like companies reach out to you because they need an automation to be done, and you sign them up with an account and you do it for them?
Yes, we not only develop the automation for them, but we also offer management of that automation stack. So not just developing one, but any that they need, and then the management of that being updating of it, maintaining it, making sure it stays on and live and is not erroring all the time, or if it is, maybe retooling it, refactoring it to make it better. So yeah, we do all of that for our clients for automation. We haven't gotten into doing that for maintaining like databases and stuff, because typically databases don't have that kind of issue typically. But yes, we do offer that to our clients. And it's not just that we're a no-code operator. We typically work with COOs, like operations, heads of companies on operations, or even CEOs and owners, the people that are in the operations space for their company.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Maybe we should
you
have a live
operators.
into we can have a live into NoCode Op, kind of a different playlist. It's so interesting.
Absolutely.
It's such a new aspect, a new job figure, and very not much traditional at all.
Sure. So let's go into some of the scenarios and not only how you can get started with this scenario, but what they look like. Let's create a new one. So this is your development interface, kind of call it your IDE as people say, your development environment. So some options and some features on this. So with Make, not only do you have certain out-of-the-box features included on any plan, not dissing or downplaying Zapier, but logical routing is included in any plan. Whereas in Zapier, you need to pay for the Pro plan to get paths. A logical routing is in any feature or in any plan in Make. So that's a big con or pro for Make. The same with webhooks. So when you want to do things with the webhook in a more custom webhook, like you just want to send data to it and have it trigger, you can create your own webhooks as needed. So there's no plan limit, there's no paywall, there's no feature limit. That's out of the box as well. Let's see. So say we wanted to trigger a scenario with the webhook. So we would create it here. So here's your hook module. And so these are called modules in Make. So the little circular circles, I guess, are called modules. So when you want to create this webhook and set up the scenario to trigger off the webhook, you would go add. So add, and then name it whatever you want. So from whatever source or destination, say I'm just testing this, so I'm going to call it from Postman.
Rachel is asking quick definition of logical routing. Is that if else scenario?
Logical routing. Yep. So that's what the router is. So say, for instance, we get webhook data, and depending on a field in the webhook data, say it's a label of something, a name of something, we want the action to go, or the workflow to go one way and perform actions on one route, or in one set of workflow sub actions, or another way. We can do that with the router. So it routes depending on your filters. The same way, the Zapier paths work. You establish a filter, and then it runs based on that parameter. And then you can have multiple. I don't even know if there's a limit of how many you can have. I've seen some.
Let's go
some
test
pretty
it.
Crazy work. Yeah, right. And you can have multiple routers, one after the other. So it's not just one. Like I could have, say, a router here, and then based on some other data in this workflow, I go another level of routing, for instance. So it's not just one router or one, set of logic. I can have multiple.
Mm-hmm. That's nice.
And then again, you can also do it another. So you can have, this router, then this one. So you can get really intricate and really complex with your workflows. But again, going back to the love of this platform, it's all visual. So as you can see with this layout, I can see my entire workflow right in front of me, and I can actually see it execute. So if I were to hit run once, if I had other apps configured, I can see it all run in real time and see how it executes. And so this is your entire workflow. Whereas in Zapier, it would all be, kind of linear, like this, or however they have it built. I haven't used Zapier in a few months, so I'm a little out of touch. But instead of it being, top down, it's left to right, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Some other nice features of this editor. So you've got save, so you can save it at any point. A bunch of the scenario settings I'll go into, but just to go over these features. So you can take notes. So if you're like, okay, I want to take a note on this module. So what does this do? It does something, part of this process, or whatever the note would entail.
That's really, really helpful, because I was literally doing that on a Post-it right now.
Right, exactly.
And that's automations for you.
Right, exactly. So you can auto align your scenarios. So say if you're, placing things wherever and you want to clean it up a little bit, you can just align it and it'll clean it up. Explaining the flow. So this is a nice little feature that will show you how data would move through the scenario in real time. So if you click that and say you have a router, maybe you have an iterator, it'll break it up and keep it going. Some other features. So if you're on a paid plan, you can have importing and exporting as well as versioning. So and by versioning, I mean going back and reverting to a previous version. So if you wanted to like take a copy of this scenario that you've built and either build it for another client or build it for another function in your company, but you don't want to spend the time, establishing all of this. Maybe you just copy and paste the scenario and just change a few things. You can export it, and it exports as a .json file, and you just re-import it. Previous versions, there are none in this scenario, but if you saved like multiple times and you're like, oh wait, I did something that I shouldn't have done, you can go back and revert to a previous version.
I love a backup. Always love a backup.
Yeah, exactly. So here in this, this is all out of the box. You can repeat, so you can have a repeater, repeat a certain step of actions as many times. Iterating, so the iterator that would take like an array and run that list. So that's a comparable feature to like line items or looping in Zapier. So it's the iterator, and then you've got an aggregator on the other side that like finishes that sub process. Routing, which is this, and then they've also got error handling. So that's what directives are. So say you have an app and you're using like Calendly or something, and that for some reason throws an error, say the API call times out or there's a system error or something, you can handle that automatically. So if you wanted, let me bring up something else. So let me see, can I add one here? So for instance, if this module fails for whatever reason, I can add an error handling route that does something. Maybe instead of just using an error handler like this, I can also send a Slack message. So I can also send a Slack message to myself, or what other, any other app that I want to. Maybe I create a record in my database or something. So then it sends a file or sends a message, to a channel. Hey, this automation failed. Go fix it.
That's really helpful.
Sure. It's also got a bunch of development tooling. So things like setting variables, sleeping, so that's like a delay function, aggregating of data, composing and switching, just individual tools that you can use for the development. Unlike Zapier, they don't need a step to run formatters. So in something like set multiple variables. So in here, if you want to set a whole bunch of formulas to output data, you would just add a variable and then build a function. So here would be your little functions menu. So if you want to build an if statement, if input is this, then do this or that. That's all included in this little flyout menu here, which are all your functions. So you've got some general math functions, text, dates, working with arrays themselves, and then custom variables, which is variables in your company as well. So that's pretty neat, as well as like the scenario variables. So if you want to get the execution ID, things like that, that's extremely handy.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and it's also got some more advanced things like text parsing, so regular expressions, getting things based on their tag or HTML data. So just getting a little bit more advanced with building like a complex workflow. Let me see if I can show you this one too. So that's kind of like the development overview. And then when you want to save, just hit the save button. It shows you that it's saved.
What's the little airplane for?
Yeah, so that one is just explaining the workflow.
Oh, nice.
So notice it's got the dots that came out. And if you had a fully configured workflow, like one that had all the modules set up, it would it basically shows you what the scenario does when new data arrives. So this is saying data arrives, go up this route first, then go down this route. So it just shows you how the data proceeds along the workflow.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So I'm going to show you a scenario that I built for one of my clients. They're based out of the UK, and they do outsourced and fractional accounting, bookkeeping, and CFO services.
I bet it's really complex.
It was kind of large. It was actually kind of fun to build. So this solution essentially takes a Zoho Forms form and processes it and creates a zero journal entry in their client's account, because they provide outsourced services. So it's this big long workflow that just takes form data, looks up a bunch of stuff in Airtable, looks up some stuff in Xero, creates the line items for the journal entry, and creates it, does a little bit of math, and then sends a Slack message to their team saying, hey, this was just processed, go check it out. If it errors, then we do some more processing, doing like a bit of a forced balance on their journal, and then doing the same thing. Just add it to the journal, send a message. So it's big and long, but it's a rather simplistic workflow if you look at it, if you were to write it out or spell it out for it. So it's big and long, but it saves their team. I think our numbers that we looked at it when we built it were about 40 hours a week to do all this data entry and lookup manually.
Yeah. And how much time did you save? Yeah.
Yeah, so it saves them quite a bit of time from doing all of this, and it runs 7 or 8 times a day for all their specific clients that use this service.
That's amazing.
And it takes, this one time took 12 seconds, one took 20 or 30. So it takes, minimal time for this to run and complete. It does take quite a bit of operations, but they're still on, I think they're on the core plan at, I think 40,000 a month.
I mean, less than 1% of the 40 hours a week required for it. So that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So what some things you can do, but building a complex workflow, it looks complex, but it just takes a lot of steps to do what we were needing the result to be. But very impactful, kind of simplistic. Take a form entry and build a journal entry in Xero, but we had to do a lot of things with that data to get to that result. But the time saving is very impactful for their company. And it's all automated, obviously. So as soon as their clients send in their form, which because they're based in the UK, that was at like 10 or 11 at night. Instead of doing that when the form comes in for their company, they just do it in the morning and process the invoice or the journal entry.
Yeah, this is amazing. I mean, you can see how helpful it could be for any company, and it will just replace so many things in the future. It's just like everything is gonna, whether you want it or not, you're gonna have to need these tools for your company to like keep on moving and developing at the speed that everyone else is nowadays.
And it's not even simply operations in like an agency or a service company. Like you can even build lightweight SaaS on this. Like you can build the workflows and logic behind a SaaS platform, like a very lightweight one, don't get me wrong. But like I'm on a couple of projects right now that we're going to be using Make scenarios to perform a bunch of the functions that this platform is going to need. We're doing it in Make scenarios to start. We're going to have them rebuilt in code and have them hosted. But for our MVP and for our initial idea, we're starting with Make.
That's brilliant.
Or a platform for a software company.
Well, I think we couldn't have had a better person than you to present Make today.
Thank you.
This was, I don't know whether you had any more, but it was so informative. Thank you so much. I truly appreciated and loved your pace. and the clarity in your explanation. So even for somebody like me who'd never seen it before, you made it really clear and very pleasant to watch. And once again, super informative. I absolutely enjoyed it. So thank you so much. Let's open up to the...
is don't be scared to get into it. Like, we talk about JavaScript and APIs and all this stuff. It's visual. It is truly no code. Like, you get in, create your account, get started, build a scenario, drop in some modules. It's all very easy to start. So don't be scared off by all the technical terms that I'm using. Get in and start putting workflows together. Put some stuff together. Try it out. If it's not right or not exactly what you need, then maybe you add in a formula. Maybe you add in some other stuff. But to start, it is all no code. Like, you don't need code or any code knowledge to do any of it.
Yeah, get your hands dirty.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. Let's open up to the community. Let's have a look. So if anyone here, I can see there's Steve, Jen, Vinny, Sage, NoCode Sage, John, Matthew, Rachel, Keaton. If any of you guys have any questions, feel free to either unmute your mics or put your hands up if there's more than one question here. You can use the emojis at the bottom on your GatherTown bar, or you can use the chat if you're feeling shy. You don't want to come on camera and mic, whatever it's your favorite option. I can hear somebody's mic. Rachel.
Hi.
Hey.
Thank you so much for the time spent on this topic. It's really, really interesting and useful. I wanted to ask, because it sounds as though you're very experienced using Zapier as well as Make / Integromat, and do you consider Make in its current form to be kind of like an improvement upon Zapier for like across the board, like one step up, or do you feel like there are certain scenarios where Zapier fills a niche for certain people doing certain things?
I will say, like I was saying before, they do have a bit of the more market share with, when somebody considers, I want to automate something, they Google search or whatever, and what comes up first is typically Zapier because they've been around longer. The advantage I will say of Zapier over Make is they have a lot more pre-built applications in their platform. So like I work with another startup that I co-founded, and one of the things that we use in that startup for our clients was something called Pay Funnels. It's a payment link platform that you can use on top of Stripe. But the problem with it is they don't have an open API, and they don't have an easy webhook function in their API at all. So for us to trigger scenarios and automations, we actually had to use a Zapier trigger that sent data via webhook over to an Integromat at the time scenario. So there's a bit of a mix of both solutions to get the intended workflow built. So in that regard, Zapier was our needed platform for that one workflow because they were the ones that had the webhook capability, and Make didn't, and I couldn't do that with their platform. So there is a bit of a line, whether there is a bit of a balance act, depending on what you need to do for your workflow, for your solution, for your automation. But I will say across, in a general sense, Make is easier, it's better, it's cheaper, it's faster, it's more cost effective for what you're paying for. But there are times when you may have to blend the two solutions for your needed workflow.
Thank you. You have such detailed, articulate answers for everything.
All experience.
It is fantastic. Vinny, did you have a question? Thank you so much, Rachel, for being here and for your question.
Congrats on the presentation. It was really interesting.
Oh, thanks.
And my question is, what are the most common use cases and what kind of companies are you working with on your projects?
I have a pretty good mix. The client that I showcased, Addition Finance, they're a UK-based accounting and finance company. They're more of a service company, but they're moving towards a SaaS platform. So they're in the financial and accounting space. They're like a professional service provider. I have clients who do event orchestration and logistics. So they like events at nightclubs and things like that for their users. So they're more like of an e-commerce, like high volume ticket sales. So they're like a sales company. I have other clients that do different kinds of work. Like I have one that does a spa. So like they run a spa. Just a whole mix of clients. Like there's no one vertical that I service more than the other. I like to say that I'm vertical agnostic or industry agnostic. It doesn't matter what you're doing. If you need something automated, we can provide it for you, because the platforms we use, it doesn't matter what vertical you're in. If the software is in Make or has an API, we can use it. So it doesn't matter. So not to say that there isn't one that we service more than the other, but we don't look at that when we're looking at client work typically.
On the process that is already established, or do you also help the client designing the process and thinking about the user experience? I don't know if that is a kind of work that you do also in project.
We can help advise on the process. Typically, clients come to us with a needed, even at a basic like workflow level, like, hey, when this happens, we need these 4 things to happen, or this one thing to happen. And then we can work from that or expand on it. We can also show either weaknesses or limitations in that workflow, or say, hey, you can also do these other things. Like your workflow has 2 actions, but what else in your company would you want to incorporate into that workflow? Like some common ones are, trigger happens, send Slack message. Well, what about capturing that data in your database or doing other things in the company aside from just sending a Slack message? Oh, it's a great idea. Or yeah, that would be, we were thinking about doing that, but didn't know how to approach it. So just opening up the door, really. But we do both. I mean, we can help ideate a workflow or ideate an automation, but they typically would need to come to us with that workflow in mind. Like I can't tell you what you want. I can help you build it or make it better, but you need to have some idea of what you want automated to start.
Or I guess you could price them differently. You could have consultancy and offer that as a service with its own price. And then if you want to automate it as well, then it's another type of service on top of that.
Yeah, we typically don't just offer like process development. It's usually, hey, I want to automate X, Y, and Z. It's not like, how would I do this in my company? Mm-hmm. It's, I've got a process or I've got an idea to automate, but I want to automate it. So it's usually we start with tech first. It's not help me develop a process. It's help me automate a process, because we don't really do business coaching or consulting.
Brilliant. Steve, you got your hand up.
Yeah, so this is a really great presentation, Guy. I do appreciate it. One of the things, and I kind of run into this issue all the time in some of my personal automations, is there's kind of an interesting middle ground between like the event trigger automations and like more heavy duty like data transformation work. And like, it's nice that like Make has some sort of aggregations on this, but I've never really gotten to like the huge use case in the same way that like a Power BI or another more specialized tool would be able to get to. You know, is there just like a quick 1 to 2 minute like brief around like where you've experienced like complexities and some of this more advanced eventations that you run into, like things like that? Any just thoughts on it?
Yeah,
would be great.
Absolutely. So there was a project that I'm still to this day trying to finish up and work on that we started in February, but a client needed a more of a data pipeline, not just an automation, but they had a platform that their company used that has an API, but they want to visualize data on top of it. But what the idea was is we actually created a data warehouse in BigQuery, so Google BigQuery. They wanted to use Data Studio. So they had like both ends of their solution. They had the beginning and the end, but they didn't have anything in the middle. So what the idea was we created a Google BigQuery data warehouse, and then we have 7 or 8 automations that connect off of the API's webhook events, do some transformation, do some data gathering, and then pipe that into, so it's building their data warehouse and database off the API's events. So when a client makes a sale, when there's a new client, when the client books an appointment, all that data is being piped into their data warehouse through the automation. So yes, it's not just business or operations event-based, hey, form submitted, whatever. It can be used as a data warehouse, something, or not a warehouse, a data pipeline, or that kind of idea. So not like an ETL platform, but it can in some regard, but it can be used as like a pipeline. Hey, build me a database of all these events.
Yeah, and I guess it just comes down to like how much you're willing to spend on your actions for each of those, because if you're getting, you know, one event per minute, obviously that's going to be a lot different than a few events per day.
One thing I will say to that point, though, there is a way to scale past the operations limits of that, and that's where you get into something like N8N or NodeMation.
Got it.
That's an awesome platform, but it is low in kind of pro code in that you need some knowledge around scripting, web a little bit, because it's either their cloud version or a hosted version. Like I'm running a self-hosted version on Heroku for my own company for some things. In that regard, there is no limit. There is no operations counts. There is no, oh, I'm running out of, you know, operations, I got to top up. It's all based on your server resources. So in that regard, in the future, I'll likely move my client from a make environment to an N8N environment where you trigger off of a hook, and it doesn't matter how many times it happens, it's going to process it all the time. It's never going to turn off. There's no operations limits. It's just going to run so long as my server's still up or their server's still up.
Got it.
So there's ways, it's like make is a great place to start or something like that. MVP it, figure out like you're saying, operations counts, figuring out limitations, issues, but then taking it to that next level once you're ready to mature that solution.
Cool. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I nearly forgot to mention that today NCO, so NoCode Ops, and Make partner up to give you guys 3 months of access to their pro plan with 10,000 operations. So I will be sharing that link with you on our Discord and everyone here attending today. So yeah, thank you, Make. Absolutely. And thank you so much, Guy, for being here with us. This was our first NoCode Ops Community Show event. I'm really happy that I can happily say it was a success because, you know, we learned so much from you and we had so many great people attending. So I'm really happy. Please do stick around. I'm sure we'll see more of you because I will be asking you for some more knowledge to share.
Oh, I'm here.
And
don't worry about that.
For anyone else, you know, that would like to come up as well, Rachel, I'm looking at you, and be one of our speakers. We can keep in touch. Keaton, did you have something to say before we wrap up?
Yeah, there's a few of us in the NoCode community or NCO community that are made partners. So it's not just me. Like Martin, there's a few of us that are partners. So we're all in kind of the same boat. So I mean, I'm happy to more than happy to answer questions, but there's more than just one of us too. So if I can answer your question, then maybe Martin can or some other folks can.
Awesome.
Hey, Claudia, I know that you're trying to wrap this up. Can I please ask one more question?
Sure. Please go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I come from a Webflow background, and the general consensus with Webflow is, you know, you can build a site without understanding code. But if you do know, use, and understand code, it's going to be easier, and you'll probably do a better job. Or you can like unlock certain cool things. So it seems to me from speaking with you or listening to you today, that like kind of API webhooks is the equivalent to like what you don't need but kind of need. I don't know if you have any other things you would add to that.
Getting knowledge on APIs is only going to help your development knowledge and your development expertise. So you don't need to know about APIs and webhooks and such. Webhooks and APIs are kind of similar in that a webhook is essentially an API endpoint. So I would wrap that into knowing APIs in general. Mm-hmm. there's quite a few courses out there. I'm sure someone here in the NCO community is going to do something about that in the future too. But knowing and understanding what an API is, what it does, what it can do for you is just going to make you better, both in the Webflow development side, in Make and Integromat side. Doesn't matter, because both those platforms, they both have an API. So Webflow has an API that I can use in Make, because I use Webflow for most of my web dev projects, by the way.
Yeah.
Like my company is built on Webflow, but Make has an API, Webflow has an API. Most platforms in SaaS have or developing APIs. So knowing and understanding the architecture of an API, what's a get, what's a post, what's a put, delete, what's an endpoint, how to authenticate, like that's all important, because in your case, you might use it in a script in a Webflow page to call an API for your development project. But in Make, I'm going to call the same API for an automation. I don't need to use the output on a web page. I use the output in my workflow. Similar, uses of an API, but I just use that output in a different way. You display it on a page or feed it to another section or something. I'm just using it in the workflow.
Cool. Thank you so much.
It makes a great place to even try calling APIs. They make it very easy. So if you're getting into API development or getting into API calling and working with it, another great place to do that aside from Make is called Postman. That's a development platform for APIs. Free to use, free to start. Much more catered to API work than Make, but you can use Make to make API calls.
Thank you.
Awesome. You got a question, Keaton?
Yeah, I think you did.
Just had one question. How much can we work on extracting data through these automations? Like if we have a list of emails coming, how can I extract the topics or the numbers, or I want to extract certain figures out of it? So is it possible?
So are you asking about how to do that inside of a Make automation or inside of like an API?
Yeah, inside Make automations.
And you're trying to list it by, like, you get an email that has like some CCs or has like a bunch of addresses in the email?
In the body also.
Okay. You'd probably use some text parsing. So you'd probably use like a regular expression. There's a couple of ways to do that in the automation. You can either use like a regex, which is what we call them, regular expressions, which is simply a module in Make that you could set up in your workflow that you put in the pattern, the kind of a formula, and then it will parse out all the things that match that formula. So there are ways to do that. You would just have to set up that text parsing module in the workflow, and then figure out the regex to do that. There's tools for that too.
Sure. Just one last question. How much are you thinking of advancing this into the AI field?
I didn't understand. Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah. How much are you thinking of extending this idea into the AI field, artificial intelligence, automations in this AI and ML field?
Automations in AI?
Yeah.
I mean, if usually when you're talking about AI or NLP, like natural language processing, stuff like that, that's where you're going to get into APIs, because a lot of those platforms and a lot of that technology is built into an API. So like one of them you could use is GPT-3. So that's like a NLP AI. Not too familiar with all that construct, but it's a software you can use to do natural language processing. And there's APIs out there that you can send like data to, and it'll process it for you and give you an output. So typically when you're leveraging that service, they build that AI technology into an API that you can leverage. You can even do that in a Make automation. So, hey, get me my body, maybe send it to one of those APIs, and maybe it outputs sentiment analysis, or it outputs a mood, or it outputs, some kind of processing, or so that's how I would interact with AI in Make, is I would look for an API to use that has that kind of AI model that you want to use. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sure.
There should be, depending on what you want to do with that type of AI, there should be, look at rapidapi.com. That's like a marketplace for thousands of APIs.
Okay.
And you could use that, if you find one, you can use that in Make through the HTTP module. It's an app in Make called HTTP. That's like a generic web service module. And you'd make that call through that.
Thank you.
I shared the
sorry.
website. Is it not that one? Oh,
it's Rapid. Sorry, Rapid. Yep. Rapid API. Yep.
Awesome. Well, everyone else is left. So thank you so much for being here, for being such an amazing speaker with us today. We will try and get these events more regularly every Thursday, starting possibly from September, as we need some time to cool off for the summer.
Sure.
But this was such a great start. And Guy, I'm so excited to have you within our community of no-code operators. And, just in general, the possibilities are limitless in that space. There are so many great minds, and yeah. What were you saying? You're great. What were you saying? You're not even what?
like the door even opens after automation, because like for my business, I'm now getting into internal tool application development in Retool. So like building tools in Retool that not only my internal company is going to use, but I'm going to flip some of that to be external facing for my clients. So like, how do you build your own dashboard for your clients? Like getting into that stuff is a whole different ball game, because you're now using a front end like Retool and a back end like Postgres. Mm-hmm. How do you build a database? How do you build a front end? There's a whole bunch of like way more opening, of doors.
Yeah, it's really exciting. It's really exciting.
Automation is only one piece of that solution I'm building, because in the thing I'm building, I'm posting to a Make scenario that runs some things. That's one piece to this whole solution. So just opening, expanding.
Yeah, I started off as a Webflow developer, so this whole is just the same for me. I'm just picking a flower and I can see all these roots coming through. So it's beautiful. Absolutely. All right, well, thank you so much. Once again, I'll be looking forward to seeing you in our Discord, and I'll make sure I'll share this event with you and with anyone else who wasn't able to attend here in our immersive experience on Gather. But thank you so much once again, and I will talk to you very soon. And take care.
Do you still do Webflow development?
I do when I have time, juggling between my two communities. Yes.
Are you still with like the Webflow community? I was in part of that for a while. I don't do development, but I know a lot of the Webflow developer folks.
Yeah, I do as well. I'll probably
US based.
Yeah, I'm in touch with a lot of them, and obviously I'm the founder at Floxy's community as well. So.
Sure.
Yes, still very much involved in the Webflow world.
That's awesome. I love Webflow. It's so nice.
It's amazing. All right, I'm gonna shut the YouTube as well. And thank you so much, Guy. Okay. I will talk to you very soon. And thank you, Keaton, and everyone else who was here with us today.
Yeah, thanks. See you.
All right, take care. Bye-bye. And thank you very much, YouTube. We went a little bit over the hour, but it was such an informative session that we could have gone on for days and days. So join us at NoCode Ops Community. If you're a no-code operator, you would like to learn some more, you would like to share your knowledge, we're there for you on Discord 24/7, and soon to be on Gather Town every Thursday. All right. Bye. Take care.